Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 52, brought to you by the one and only Black Belt Magazine. And today I am extremely excited about this special guest. We have a Hungarian legend, one of, if not the greatest point fighters in European point fighting history. We have Team Paul Mitchell and Team Corrales' Zsolt Moradi. Zsolt, I'm so excited to have you on the show. We were teammates for the entire time that you were on Team Paul Mitchell, right? And so it's really special for me to have you on. But I know that I know you, obviously, but a lot of our audience, this may be their first time hearing from you. So I wanted to start, just kind of introduce yourself, tell us about you, and go ahead and take us back. Like, how did this whole martial arts journey start for you?
Hello, Jackson. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon here in Europe. Good morning for you, and good evening if you see it at the other side of the world. Well, thank you very much for the call. I was very happy to join this podcast. It's very good to see Jackson. Very, very good to see you, Jackson, because it's been a while since we were able to catch up a little bit. Well, I am 32 years old and I'm a retired athlete. I retired in 2018. Retired as the most successful kickboxer in the history of WACO. Actually, I retired due to an injury, but I feel my career complete. And winning the 10th WACO World Champion title, I think I fulfilled my goals in my sports career, if we are talking about the competitive sport. I have businesses in Budapest, but my top priority is still around sport. I work for WACO. I am the chairman of the athletes committee, and I have been appointed to the board of directors of WACO IF. So I have a lot of things to do. I have a lot of work in the organization. It's a privilege, but rather it's a duty for me to represent the athletes at the highest level. And I think I always have some connection, and I always want some connection to the sports, because this is my life. This is what I've been doing in the last 24 years. So taking care about athletes, taking care about my teammates, and try to promote and improve the sport. So briefly, that's me.
Very cool. And that's one thing that I love about you, Zsolt, and so many of our, retired great competitors, is giving back to the sport that gave so much to your life, right? And that's something that you have been an absolute role model for, is trying to give back through your work with WACO and everything else that you've done since retirement to continue making this sport better for all the athletes. And you mentioned that you retired due to injury, and obviously the injury was aggravated toward the end of your career. But I think that some of that goes all the way back to an injury that you experienced in childhood, right? So let's kind of turn the clock back and talk about that some. First, how did you get started in martial arts in the first place? And then take us through that injury that would ultimately affect you, throughout your career.
Well, my parents sent me to a sports school, and I'm talking about the elementary school. Mostly in Europe, but in Hungary, definitely the kids start elementary school at the age of 8 years. So when I started the school, I needed to choose a sport, needed to choose a club to which I could join officially, so I could be part of this sports school. And first, I started with volleyball. I'm not sure how popular it is, this sport in the US, but it is quite popular in Europe. and that's a very good sport actually. So I loved it, but at the end of the year, my coach, who was a teacher in the elementary school, left the school and left the club as well. So I needed to choose another sport. At that time, in the certain district of Budapest where I lived, wrestling was very, very popular, and there were 2 to 4 Olympian wrestlers in that district. So most of the kids went to do wrestling. So my teammates as well, not teammates, classmates as well. So I thought that was a good idea to join them, have fun with them after school at the training, and at the same time, one of my father's friend told to my father, why don't I join the kickboxing classes what was also placed in the same district. So I started both of the sports at the same time, and I could do it for like 3 or 4 months, because you can imagine my parents couldn't take me every day to different places. It was very busy for them as well. So I needed to choose, and I decided kickboxing will be my sport. From the very first moment I stepped into our gym, into the dojo, I realized that this is what I need. The atmosphere was way different than anything else I experienced until then. So yeah, I knew that this is what I was going to do.
It's a very cool love at first sight story there. I feel like a lot of martial artists have that experience where you walk into the dojo or the gym for the first time and fall in love with it, right? And so at some point during your childhood, right, we talk about that injury. I believe you've told me before it was like a water slide incident, right? When did that happen, and what happened?
I was 50 years old when it happened, the accident. So water slide, I went to a lake, a famous lake in Hungary. That's the biggest lake in the country. Every kids and everyone goes there for holiday in the summer, especially. So we went there with my friends, and I used that water slide. But I think I was the very first who used the water slide on that day. And the pool was not filled with water completely, and they let me slide on it. And when I got to the water, I hurt my head, and the disc in my neck was broken. It broke actually. So it was a very fortunate situation, I could say that now, because I could have been paralyzed like easily. It depended on some millimeters, really. So I feel very lucky, and that's why I tattooed number 13, because this accident happened on the 13th of June, Friday the 13th, actually. So since then, it's my second birthday. So I needed to spend 10 days in the hospital. I had about 12-hour long kind of lifesaver surgery. So they fixed my neck. They put another bone from my hip to the neck. It wasn't easy. It was a very difficult surgery, especially for my parents. I felt invincible at that time. When you are young, you feel that you never die. So I was very positive then too. Like since then, always I'm very positive. But looking back, those days were very critical for me. But doctors could could make me feel all right. And after 6 to 8 months of recovery, I could go back to train again. And I remember that about 2 or 3 months after the accident, I had a thing which I needed to wear during daytime when I was standing, and that was kind of make my posture stable, you know. So I had to use that until it was recovered completely. And I went to our training camp for a week, and you know, my coach didn't let me. Istvan, my coach, did not let me join the others. I could watch them, and I could do push-ups. So at that time, I could do 200 push-ups like in 3 minutes, because that was the only exercise I could do. So it was very funny. I was playing table tennis with that thing on my neck. So, you know, I could look like a real aristocratic gentleman. So it was very funny for my teammates, but that helped me a lot to recover fully. And when I was 16, actually I won my first world title a year later. So it helped me to see the world. I mean, the accident helped me to see the world a little bit differently. Since then, I see every day as a gift. So, and if there is any goals I define for myself, I work for that step by step, day after day. I always wanted to be better a little bit today than I was yesterday because of this accident. So this was a milestone in my life.
It's an excellent story, and a great comeback story, because, you know, to have that type of an injury that severe to your head and neck, and then a year later be a world champion in a combat sport, kickboxing, point fighting, it's something that, especially today, no one would even consider trying to get back in the ring that quickly, right? But you were so in love with the sport, and you were dedicated, obviously, to your physical therapy and getting better, doing the 200 push-ups and everything, that you were able to recover fully and make that comeback. So truly an incredible story there. And then we talk about these kind of essential moments that happened in your childhood that kind of turned you into the man and the competitor that you would become. I think another big part of that is the man that you were recruited to Team Paul Mitchell with, Laszlo Gombos, right? So you've known Laszlo since you guys were boys, right? And just talk a little bit about Laszlo and what it was like to have a training partner like him, also one of the best point fighters in the world. What was it like to have a training partner like him for your entire career?
Well, it's not about only one person, but Gombe definitely the most one of the most important, if not the most important teammates of mine. When I started at the age of 8 years, the sport, I started it with Christian. Actually, Christian was 5 years old. Christian Jaroszkiewicz, my oldest friend. So we started with him and my coach. We three started the whole process to create a core for the team. Of course, until that time, there were like 100 plus students of the club, but not at a high competitive level. So we three started something together, of course, led by Istvan, our coach. And his personality was one of the main keys of our success. A year later, Gömbi joined us, and he is 3 years younger than me and 4 years younger than Christian, so almost at the same age. And we are very similar personalities. So if we decide something, we want it badly, and we ready to do almost every effort for that goal. So we four started to work together. We could bring the best of each other on every training, and that's the key, the consistency. So we trained and sparred 4 or 5 times a week for years. We all were our hard workers and could push our limits and day to day, and because we wanted to be the best even on the trainings, and that's how this core part of the team was created. 1 or 2 years later, Richie and Thomas joined us. So this was the 5 student and the coach who have done something in the sport which will be very difficult to do again. I believe so. So we could always push our limits. People always ask me who was the best in Kirali, and I never could say that I was the best fighter in that time and among them or someone else, because I believe that it's just a matter of time who is in the best shape. We were at very similar level when we were at the peak of our careers. So I never like to use the phrase "the best in the world" if I was talking about my teammates or myself.
Absolutely. And that brings me to something really interesting that I want to get into here, because one thing that I was always impressed with watching Kirali's fighters from the first time that I went to the Irish Open is of that core. In my opinion, you guys have very different fighting styles, right? Your greatest weapon was always your kicking. Laszlo has the lead leg hook kick, the blitz. Tomas has the blitz and the reverse punch. Richie, the defensive fading away back fist, the movement. So you all fight very, very differently, which I find interesting. And then a lot of American sport karate fans don't know this. You mentioned Christian. He collected numerous WACO world titles as well. A lot of the Americans only know those of you who were brought over for Paul Mitchell to the States as well. But Christian is also a point fighting legend from Karali. And so I'm glad that you mentioned him as well. So given all of that, what do you think it was about Istvan, your coach? What was it about his teaching, his coaching, his guidance, leadership? What was it that helped you guys become so successful? And I guess just talk about Istvan a bit and why you respect him so much and what's made him successful.
First of all, he has the professional knowledge to teach generally and teach martial arts as well. So he has a master degree of sports sciences at different faculties. So he's a smart man, first of all. He's determined, so he could motivate and he could keep motivated us, which is very important, because if you see almost a lifelong careers of athletes, then there are ups and downs a lot. In a lucky case, by the end of the careers, there are those ups and downs are not that low and high, because you teach the lessons during the years. And he could teach us a lot of things, and because of his personality, his determined personality, combined with his visions, we felt that there is no goal we couldn't reach. Not because we are the best, not at all. Not because we are the talented, we are the most talented, but because we had a belief in his knowledge and belief in in him as a person. So he supported us not only in our sports careers, but outside the sports careers. So just an important example. He always wanted us to think about our future. So we needed to study. So one of the reasons I finished my master degree and still study on a university is because of him, because he tried and do prepare us for the afterlife, for the non-sporting careers. And this is very important to see yourself in the world and think about your future. This is very important, I think. And he was not only our coach, he was our second father and still our second father, and he was also our friend. But when we were at the trainings, he was the coach. We did what he told us to do. And soon after we started to work together, the results came. So we won the tournaments, and the more time lost, the more we believed in him. So when we could go step by step on that ladder, on the way to become a world champion, for example.
Absolutely. A great testimony to really, and again, a lot of Americans don't realize this, one of the all-time great point fighting coaches in our sport, because of the talent that he has produced and the success that Team Corrali has had, both with individual world championships and winning team fights, winning Irish Open titles, and everything in between. So I think that that's a brilliant testimony to him. One thing, we mentioned Irish Open, one thing that I always found really interesting, because American teams don't do this. And I noticed that with Corrali, like in the open weight, for example, at the Irish Open, there would be times where they would get to a semifinal, and it would be set up to be you versus Laszlo, or you versus Tomas, or Tomas versus Laszlo, or whatever, right? And every single time at Irish Open, one of you bowed out to the other fighter out of respect and had them move on. So one thing I always wondered, is this predetermined? Is there a plan for like who's going to move on if you come to face each other? Or is it based on who's left in the matchup? Like if you have Jack Felton sitting in the final and it comes down to two Corrali fighters in the other semifinal, is it predetermined, or do you go with who the better matchup to beat Jack would be? Something like that. How did that work? Just tell a little bit about that. Strategy, respect, what was it?
Mainly it was strategy. So I know it's hard to understand if you were not part of our team, but we lived and we fought based on one for all for one principle. I know it's hard to understand because we are talking about an individual sport, not a team sport. Of course, sometimes it's a team. There is a team event, but mainly it's an individual sport. But this is something that also István taught us, that we are a team. Of course, we worked to be the best, to be better day by day, but we worked for the team who helped us to become who we are today and support us in many ways. So we also realized that we are good fighters because of each other. This was not something we got because of talent. This is something what we worked for together. So after we realized it, we wanted to win certain tournaments for the glory of our team, the glory for István, glory for Hungary. So when we were fighting in open categories, then I believe that I can speak on behalf of the mentioned individuals, but I definitely did not think that it's only about me, but it's only about what we represent, the team, our coach, our second family. So yeah, answering your question, it was a strategy mainly, but of course it depended on who's in the best shape. So of course you can combine the best matchups if you're talking about different fighting styles, but it depended very much on the actual shape. So probably most of the people don't know that we almost all the time shared the prize equally as well after these events. Yeah, so it was never about the money. We wanted to win the money prize, of course, that was important for us. We were never rich. That, you know, it was good to anyone win the prize money, but we shared it most of the time totally equally, and that's why we supported each other. We helped each other on the trainings. So we won for our club. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason why you guys were so successful. You know, you mentioned how, like, to American teams that might sound so weird, or even other teams in Europe that might sound weird, but I love that. You know what I mean? I think that is what brought you closer together, and ultimately using that type of strategy probably helped you win more titles than you might have otherwise, right? So just out of curiosity, and we didn't discuss this beforehand, but I just want to know, was there ever a moment that you remember that decision of which fighter would move on was particularly difficult? Was there ever a time when it was really hard to decide which fighter would move on? Do you remember any specific moment?
Any specific? You know, we were equal. The five were equal in every situations. But somehow, most of the time, I was the fighter who was sent to the next round. And I'm not telling I was the best, because it's not about that. It was about that most of the time I was in the best shape. And of course, there was a time, not only once, not only twice, but when I was not in a good shape. But the others believed that I'm in a good shape. And they wanted to send me, but I wanted to win the title for us, but there was doubts in me. So I don't remember a specific a moment, a specific special decision, because there were like hundreds. But in those times when I was not in my best shape, then I have doubts. So that's why it was very difficult to choose between us, because if I, who most of the time are in the best shape, cannot take the risk, then who's gonna be the other one? So most of the time we agreed, like we discussed in 20 minutes and that was done. So no bad feelings, but sometimes because of the reasons, because that sometimes when I felt that Gumby was in better shape, but Gumby didn't feel comfortable with that. There were different reasons. yeah, we should ask him or ask Richie or Thomas, but sometimes it was
I'm
difficult.
sure they're watching, and we need to get them on the podcast as well. So that will happen. But anyway, and I hope that our viewers appreciate that, because that's such a unique perspective on really the entire sport. I've never heard of anybody else, any other team doing that, but it makes sense, and it obviously worked for you guys really, really well. And so we've been talking so much about your teammates and the people that you were with. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the fighters that you were against. So before we bring the Americans into this, let's stay just in Europe, because I'm curious, throughout winning, 10 WACO World Championships, who would you say was the toughest fighter that you ever faced in Europe? Whether they were the most talented or just a bad matchup for you in particular, who would you say gave you the best challenge of the European fighters?
First, I would say a German fighter, Harald Schmidt. He was a kicker as well, the strongest kicker I ever fought against. At that time, when I was preparing to defend my first World WACO title, then I was preparing for him to fight in the final, and it happened. So we both got to the final, and that was one of my toughest World Championship finals. He was very strong. It was almost impossible to fight against his kicks. But I found a way, fortunately. Later, when the mentioned fighter retired, and if I needed to say only one name, that would be definitely Robbie McManamy, who I fought 4 WACO World Championship finals for. Fortunately, I won all of them, but Robbie was the person who made me better time after time. So he was the fighter who could bring the best out of me, and he's one of the reasons I needed to step up in my game plan and start to use new techniques, completely new techniques, which I wasn't comfortable to use on tournaments, when at serious tournaments, because that's one thing that you can use, and you learn of course I can use all the techniques on the training and I can demonstrate them, but using it in a tournament in almost perfect way to score a point with, that's a different story. And Robbie, probably you saw some fights of him. He has a very unique style. He's a very smart fighter, and that's why I needed to change my strategy year to year a little bit. And the third fighter who I want to mention is Roman Brundle. In the last 3-4 years of my active career, I faced him numerous times. He also has brilliant kicking skills, similar than Harald's. So yeah, these 3 gentlemen are my toughest competition. Were my toughest competition.
And I really wanted you to talk about that because, a lot of our viewers are American sport karate fans. And so I think it's important that we hear these names from these great European fighters, because Europe has such a great pedigree of fighters. And obviously, if they gave you a challenge, then clearly they're one of the world's best as well, because you were always one of the world's best at the height of your career. And so now, for the American fans that want to hear more about American fighters, we're going to move to probably what the most interesting Irish Open rivalry was of yours, which was your fights against Raymond Daniels, right? Raymond Daniels, you know what his reputation is here in America. And there's one specific moment that I want to talk about, but we'll get to that next. First, you were able to beat Raymond in, I believe, was it an Irish Open final and a semifinal, or you beat him multiple times in the ultimate Final Four at the Irish Open, right? So talk a little bit about how do you strategize to go against a fighter like Raymond, and what allowed you to have success against him where other fighters found it so difficult?
Well, Raymond was and still all of our role model. His unique and special fighting style he represents is one in a million, I think, really. So we were growing up watching his fights, actually videos on tournaments in the US, like in Las Vegas, like at a lot of other tournaments. Really, we were just watching him on YouTube, and we prepared a lot, analyzing his fights. How is it even possible to blitz that long and that fast, and how it works in a physiological way. So we analyzed his fights a lot. So it was a chess game. I needed to be aware what I am capable of, what techniques I can use effectively against him. What are the techniques he is able to use against me and generally. So we made this chess game in advance 1,000 times. Of course, when I faced him the first time, that was a semi-final of the Irish Open in 2009, probably. He defeated me by 5 points. I think that was the most score difference when I was defeated. And he kicked me twice with that spinning side kick to the body. It was very difficult for me, and but he respected me, and that's what I always see, that he respects the opponents regardless the level of the opponent. So I think that's very important. So he was a role model. He's still a role model, actually. He's still active. And I made the math, I know the techniques, I had the experience fighting him, and the next time, when the second time we fought against each other, that was Joseph, what tournament was that? I forgot it. It was in, actually the whole European team went there to compete. I don't remember. Okay, I will tell it when I will remember, but it's not the point. The point is that I got to the final of the Grand Champion. I needed to face him again, and I know what I have to do. That was, of course, a different environment in the States, because the fighting style is way different if we compare Europe to the whole American continent. But I was very determined to follow my strategy, what we discussed, and it worked. Actually, probably Ray at that time was not prepared for my style. It wasn't really special. I just know what I need to do to beat him. and fortunately I could. So I was very happy. But after that, every fight over us was a little bit different, of course, because we brought out the best of each other. So we needed to improve fight by fight to beat each other, and that was a very exciting game between us. That's my greatest rivalry, fighting him.
Oh, as a fan of sport karate, I couldn't agree more. I mean, watching that rivalry for, I started traveling and competing in sport karate really heavily in 2006, 2007. And so by the time you guys had that first matchup in 2009, I was fully aware of what was going on. I was tuned in and watching point fighting videos, watching videos from Irish Open, everything like that. So watching it from kind of the beginning of that rivalry up until his retirement Irish Open, where you wound up kind of raining on that parade in a way. I saw that entire rivalry, and as a fan of the sport, that was just extremely fun to watch. One thing before we get to the next question that I want to point out to our audience is that Zsolt just said that the most that he ever lost by in the Irish Open was 5 points. That's 2 head kicks and a punch or a body kick, right? So the fact that the most he ever lost by in the Irish Open being just 5 points in easily hundreds of fights between your divisions and the open weight and everything else. That's extremely impressive. So I want to make sure that the audience understood that. He didn't just say, oh, I lost by 5. That was the most he ever lost by at that event, which is the most premier point fighting event in the world. But anyway, so we talk about this rivalry with Ray. And it kind of draws to this huge moment where Ray made a big deal out of this was his last Irish Open. He had the T-shirt with the throne and everything, right? And anybody that watches Ray knows that before his point fighting matches, and I believe he probably does this before his kickboxing and his MMA bouts as well, he will take a knee, say, do his thing, lift his fist to the air, that whole ritual, right? And in that Irish Open, you walk up behind Ray while he's still on his knee, you kind of just look down on him until he stands up, and then you back up and it's go time, right? So, and I know that obviously you're an extremely respectful fighter. You're a model for respect and everything when you're in the ring. So what is going through your mind in that moment? Was that just for the crowd? Was it to get in Ray's head a little bit? Just take us through that, because I just think that that's epic how you just walked up behind him like that. But go ahead.
Before I'm answering, I could recall it was the New England Open in 2009. That was my, no, it was 2000, doesn't matter, 2008, 2009, but that was the New England Open when we faced each other for a second time. Answering your question, yes, that was a very special moment. I never wanted to show disrespect towards him, because it was not about that. It was about that I wanted to show him that I'm here, I'm ready to take the title. And this was something I intended to, somehow I wanted to intend to get inside his head. Because this is, sport karate is not only about the physical skills, physical abilities, but about the mental abilities as well. And at that time I was a young fighter, a successful but young fighter who, Ray met like hundreds of young and talented and successful young fighters. But I wanted to show them that I am the one here who wants to get his title. And that was very spontaneous. It's nothing I planned in advance. I felt that now I need to go there. I need to show them I'm the fighter who wants to beat him and get inside his head a little bit and try to confuse him a little bit. And I started that fight very well. I took the lead, and I could secure that lead until the end of the second round, so until the finish of the fight. So I succeeded, but not. I don't think that because of that event, but this is something very small detail which could help. Of course, keeping fair play rules.
Mhm. Absolutely, for sure. And, the reason I want you to speak about it is because, for anybody that may have even thought that it was disrespectful, I know that that's not how you meant it, right? And so I wanted you to have the opportunity to just kind of talk about that a little bit. But also, just as a fan of the sport, it was so cool to see that happen. It's kind of like, I think there's a famous picture from like the NBA basketball All-Star game of like Kobe Bryant's last All-Star game. And you see LeBron stand in front of Kobe and, like really try to seriously guard him for a moment, in jest a little bit, but also just kind of showing that passing of the torch from one great athlete to another. Anyway, I use basketball references all the time in the podcast, if you didn't know, but that's just something that I thought was such a cool moment. And then the fact that you backed it up and actually won the fight as well makes it all the more better. Wouldn't be nearly as cool if you did that than lost, right? But anyway. Yeah. So next, I want to talk about, so we've been talking about European fighters and fighting in Europe and the Irish Open rivalry with Ray. Now, a big part of your career was coming over to America and having success, and we're going to talk about some of that success specifically. But you were recruited to Team Paul Mitchell alongside Gombe in the fall of 2012. So it was literally like within a few months after I got on the team in July of 2012, then we were flying you in Oslo to the Diamond Nationals that October. So just speak a little bit about what that was like. Obviously, it wasn't the first time that you'd ever fought in America because you'd been to the New England Open, things like that. But, flying to America, knowing that you're going to be representing Paul Mitchell, which has been the most prestigious team in the States for years and years and years. Just tell a little bit about that experience.
Well, that was a great honor and is still a great honor. I think, as far as I know, we two were the first two athletes who were picked by a US team. Of course, for the first time, it was just a huge honor to represent the most prestigious and one of, if not the most successful sport karate team. It was something very special, and it was something which I needed very much, because I already mentioned to you about the ups and downs and the lack of motivation. And sometimes, sooner or later, it happens in the sporting career for every athlete. And at that time, Laszlo and me were winning almost all the tournaments in Europe, so needed something for us to keep ourselves motivated somehow. And that was a great timing from Team Paul Mitchell, and we were very, very happy that we can represent the team, we can represent our country. It felt great. I still have goosebumps when I'm talking about it. So we knew that that's a very different environment, as I mentioned before. There are cultural differences between the two continents. If you are talking about sport karate, it's not good or bad, it's just different. So if I should somehow define the two the differences, then I would say that the European style is much more pragmatic, and the American style is much more passionate. And if you are fighting in America, and I got second at the Grand Champion of my first tournament representing Team Paul Mitchell at the Diamonds, and Uh, when I got defeated, we can talk about that fight. That was not my easiest fight because yeah, there were some strange things, but that's not the point. The point is that when I was defeated, I felt the passion in every fighters in America, every American fighters that yes, we defeated Europe. So don't misunderstand me, because I believe that this is a good thing to feel that your nation, your country, I felt the pride for the nation and for the continent, which is, I think, which is very important to represent your country, to defend the interest of your country or continent. So this is something very noble, I believe. It's different than the European, because if an American fighter comes to Europe and, let's say, win or got second place, you could feel that they show more respect to the American fighter and keep a little bit bigger distance from him or her. But it's not about respect, because I never felt in the US or in the American fighting in the American continent that the people disrespects me. Not at all. Pragmatic and passionate. This is the two ways they fight, and this is just a cultural difference, nothing more. But I learned a lot fighting in the States, and that was a huge challenge for me, a big adventure, a huge challenge, and I think I could level up tournament by tournament. I visited the States competing. So that was another milestone in my career to see myself a little bit, analyze myself a little bit, and try to build up my strategy. It helped a lot to me, and it meant a lot to me.
Absolutely. And there's so many interesting points hidden in there. Now, for the viewers that don't know this, Zsolt would come back from that Diamonds the very next year and become the first European fighter to ever win the men's fighting diamond ring. So that one loss did not tell the whole story. It did motivate him. He came back and he won the diamond ring the very next year, becoming the first European fighter to do so, which is incredible. And what's interesting is, Zsolt mentioned that there was weird stuff that happened with that one fight. Essentially, the controversy was that some of the judges might have been holding up the wrong color flag when they would see a point, and then if some judges are holding up the wrong color flag, then that can mess up the score, and who knows what's going on, right? But it's almost like that needed to happen, because that loss gave you the motivation to continue fighting and becoming more and more successful in America. And, you mentioned the patriotism that the American fans and fighters showed. It's funny because I remember standing stage side at Diamonds watching you in that fight. And as the fight was drawing to its closing moments, and you were kind of making your last push at a comeback effort, we would hear the crowd, chanting USA, USA. And I'm sitting here conflicted, like, no, I don't want USA to win. Like, that's not. So anyway, so just really a really funny moment there, just like the internal conflict that I felt wanting my teammate to win when everybody else in the room was on this like American pride type deal. And then also something that I want people to realize, and I was very blessed to be on Paul Mitchell during this time period, that team fighting team that we had was stacked. It was yourself, Laszlo, we had Justin Ortiz at the peak of his game, we had a young Cameron Dawson. I mean, and we were also kind of at the tail end of the career of some other great fighters. Cass Sigmund was on the team at that time, but he had the ACL injury. And then like Greg Betlock and Alex Lane had recently retired around that period. So just a really, really cool era in Paul Mitchell point fighting history. It was awesome to see that and be a part of it and be a part of that transition to yet another great team fighting roster that we had. you mentioned the difference between the pragmatic European culture and then the more passionate American culture is how you put it. When it gets down to the actual fight and the fighting style, obviously between Wako in the States, 1 point body kicks versus 2 point. Back fist, front hand to the body counts in Wako, does not count in NASCA, right? What was the biggest adjustment for you from just a pure fighting style standpoint that you had to adjust when fighting in the States compared to Europe?
One of the adjustments was level up my hand techniques, my blitzing game. That was very important because everyone, of course, after like 10, 15 years, fighters were expecting me to kick all the time and kick only. And that was a mistake from me because it was very one-sided strategy, which I needed to change for further success. So I did, and it took a while, like 2-3 years to use my hand techniques effectively during tournaments. The other one was a general fighting style change, what was to become much more progressive. I mean, I needed to attack much more than before. If you see a Wako fight, which takes 3 rounds, or a NASCA fight, which most of the time takes only 1 round, then it's obvious there is a change between the pace of the fight. And just simply, you do not have the time for more strategical elements in the US than in Europe, where you have 6 minutes to fight. So that's why I needed to change my fighting style in that matter. And it helped my my game plan in Europe as well.
Absolutely.
So in general, it helped me. In general, fighting in the States helped me a lot. Not only kept us very, very motivated and I was very lucky to be able to face new challenges, but it a little bit changed me, and a lot of things, even techniques, were added to my game, which probably would have never happened if I stayed in Europe, fighting only in that circuit.
What I was going to
ask. So I would encourage everyone to challenge himself or herself, because these kind of challenges and adventures and differences which you might face could help you in regards of motivation and improvement as well. So it's a very useful thing, and never be too proud to use your chances to face new challenges.
That's an excellent message. And I was going to add to that. You talk about, adding techniques to your game and then using them over in Europe. I mean, in that final fight against Ray at the Irish Open, and, Ray's, was that a semifinal or was that the final? I kind of feel like that was the semifinal.
Yes, exactly. That was
right. And then you had Jack in the final. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, that doesn't matter. But one of the things that you used as a weapon in that fight against Ray was your blitz, which previously was something that you could score with it, but you never really used it. and using it so effectively both in the American tournaments to win the Diamond Ring and US Opens and things of that nature, but then also using it at the Irish Open as one of your primary weapons to help beat Ray in that fight. I just think that's so interesting, and I think it's a great message to talk about kind of the evolution of a competitor and how those new experiences can help you elevate your game. Now we're going to have a little bit more fun with this one. We've talked so much about fighting and strategy and the differences and all that, but obviously one thing that you mentioned this with Corrali, but one thing that Paul Mitchell is so passionate about is making the team feel like a family, right? And we had a lot of great memories on the team. We went to the Cayman Islands to train together and teach together and so many other things in between. So maybe just speak a little bit, maybe 2 or 3 memories that you have from coming to America and being with Team Paul Mitchell. Just your 2 or 3 favorite stories.
Well, yes, as I mentioned, it was and it's still an honor to be part of the team. And the most important and why I was lucky, because the team treated me like a family member, like how you treat a family member after knowing that member for decades, so I felt totally like home when I joined Team Paul Mitchell. So that's why it was much easier for me to adjust all the other strange and new challenges. I felt, of course, there were cultural differences, language differences, and language barriers, but it never was a problem. And regardless of the differences, we always respected each other. And that's, I don't know if you remember, whether you remember or not, that moment when I stepped for the very first time into the dojo of the kickboxing class when I was 8 years old. So I felt very similar when I joined the team. I felt that this is also my team at home, but I had known them for almost 20 years at that time, and that this situation made me feel comfortable. So I needed to focus only on fighting, and because of the you can call it American pride or just passion. Every time, every second, from coach or from any team members, I felt that I knew that they are always behind my back and get my back all the time. So I know that the team had some high expectations regarding the results from Laszlo and me, but the team never made me feel uncomfortable for this, but it helped me to keep myself motivated and push my limits. And it was very good to experience that there are similar methods, similar connections, bonds between individuals out of my country, out of my my safe zone. So it was first of all, this was something which meant a lot and still means a lot. So when you messaged me a few days ago, I was very happy to see that I have a message from Jackson Rudolph himself. So it will be great to catch up. So I still feel it's a family. And everywhere we went for tournament or for the Caymans or for have some fun in Vegas, that was always unique. And of course, most of the time it was very difficult to join the team and do 100% effort because of the circumstances, the time zone difference, etc. But when I joined the team, the moment I joined the team, I could switch something in my hand, and I felt that I'm in Europe with my team, and everything was the same. So I'll always be very thankful for these memories and the opportunity to be part of the team.
And we were very thankful to have you on the team. One thing that I always tell people about is, you talk about coming to the team and automatically feeling like part of the family. When you came to the team, you were also a leader almost immediately. And that's one of the things that I always respected most about you, was that you were somebody from a different team, from a different country, that was coming over to the States, to this team that had an over 20-year history, over 25-year history now. And right away, you assumed a leadership role. And that's just incredibly hard to do. And that was something that I always respected so much. And then, of course, you mentioned some of the good times we had, just some of my favorite memories. Swimming with stingrays in the Cayman Islands. That was a good one. All of the times that we would go and do we would visit hospitals and we'd perform for the patients. And then especially when we had both Zsolt and Justin Ortiz there, they would have little challenges to see who could do more kicks before putting their leg down. And just so many great, awesome memories. And one thing that, especially in the early going, that I always found, kind of funny, and I want to hear your take on this. And again, this is something else that we didn't talk about, but second to last question here, just because I have to know. There were a lot of times throughout your career fighting in the States where you'd be fighting and you would have Coach Damon in the chair, or standing up a lot of the time, but you'd have Coach Damon in the chair, right? And he's yelling at you in English, watch the side kick, whatever, right? Two, right? Damon yelling in English. And then you've got Laszlo right behind Damon yelling in Hungarian, right? So what I want to know is, how often were they saying the same thing? Was Laszlo translating, or did Laszlo have different ideas? Are you even hearing that? Just kind of tell us about, that experience, and kind of obviously the expertise and the leadership of Coach Damon, but then also your trusted friend and teammate Laszlo giving you the Hungarian information as well. So was it always the same message, and what was that like? Was that chaotic?
A little bit, but when I'm fighting, I can focus only the right voices, so I couldn't really hear the crowd. But the coaches, Laszlo always, and of course Coach Damon. Sometimes they thought totally different things. Sometimes they I don't know if, probably not, because they did not agree, but they did not discuss what to say. So Laszlo was telling something way different in Hungarian, and Coach Damon just instructed me with some basic things. So in the first 3 to 5 tournaments, it was pretty difficult, but after that there was I knew the system, so I could discuss the strategy with coach in advance, and with Laszlo as well. So after 3 to 5 times, I could focus on the correct advices, and it was not a problem anymore. But for the first couple of times, sometimes it was very funny, not knowing who to listen to.
Absolutely. I mean, I fought competitively when I was an underbelt, but never as a black belt or anything, and so I would just put myself in your shoes and be like, how is he listening to both Damon in English and he's having to translate, and Laszlo's yelling in Hungarian? I was always curious about how that went, and it's hilarious to know that oftentimes they were saying something totally different. But anyway, so enough with the competition and the legendary career that you had representing Corrali, representing Paul Mitchell, the Irish Open titles, the World Championships, the Diamond Rings, and everything in between. Now you find yourself, as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, you are, I want to make sure I get the title right, the Waco Athlete Committee Chairman. You're also an ambassador for peace and sport, which I know is a separate role that you're very passionate about. So I just want to give you a moment here at the end to just tell us a little bit about your ongoing projects and what you're doing for the future of sport karate, because I know that's something you're very passionate about.
Yes, as the chairman of the athletes committee, we work on a weekly basis, and actually we define the focuses for the upcoming years. So we decide the focuses, and besides these programs or projects which we support, we generally support the WACO as the International Federation of our sport. We propose a lot of recommendations coming from the athletes. So actually our committee, our team is the link between the athletes and the executive board of the sport. So we listen and we let the athletes hear their voices, which I believe it's very important. We represent the rights and interests of the athletes and inform the athletes about decisions, about any athletes related activities in WACO. So it's a frequent communication, and we would like to provide all the information what athletes need in their sporting or non-sporting career as well, because in sport it's also very important to focus on the non-sporting careers, so the afterlife of being a competitive athlete. Yeah, there are a lot of objectives we work on in the committee, and as I'm the chairman, I am part of the executive board of WACO as well. So actually athletes are completely involved in the decision-making process in the sport, which I believe is the most important, because the sport is not about the leaders, not about the sport diplomats, it's not about the sponsors, but it's about the athletes. So at the heart, the WACO and therefore the athletes committee could place the athletes at the heart of the organization. So this is how it's built up, and we consider as the most important part of our work. This is what I do mainly in my life right now, and I'm honored to be part of Peace and Sports Champions for Peace group. Champions for Peace group is a small top-level, former or active top-level athletes who, I mean, if I'm just to mention some names, Jelena Isinbayeva, who is an Olympic champion athlete, Sergei Bubka, who is also a world record holder, Olympic champion, Felipe Massa from the Formula One, Novak Djokovic from tennis, Lionel Messi just joined the group. So this is a very, it could be a very effective group if we are talking about promoting peace through sports. So there are a lot of activities what Peace and Sport as an independent international sport organization organizes. So a lot of activities which we as a group and as top athletes support. And there are a lot of other activities and projects which are established by the athletes, what Peace and Sport can support and promote. So we strengthen each other. And WACO is also in a very good relation to Peace and Sport. So WACO and Peace and Sport works together in a program called Live Together. It's about the connection and the benefits of sports for refugees. So in Jordan, there is a refugee camp called Zatari, and this refugee camp has about 60 to 80,000 inhabitants, and they live there. They cannot go back to Syria because we are talking about Syrian refugees, so their opportunities are very, very limited. And to help for 60 to 80,000 people, this is something which individuals cannot solve, but organizations, the United Nations could organize and could lead it. So there is a kickboxing part of in the refugee camp. So we trained a coach in Zatari camp, a Syrian coach named Ali, who can organize his sport activities and can teach kids in the Zatari camp to give some hope and give some opportunity for these kids who are not able to go out of the camp or go back to their own countries. So this is how WACO helps to teach the kids in Zatari. So this is only one of the projects, but this is something I'm involved in. So I went and visited the Zatari already 3 times and planned to go back last year, but because of the pandemic, it was just simply not possible because the camp is under complete lockdown, no out, no in. But fortunately, because of the internet, I could communicate with Ali, the Syrian kickboxing coach in Zatari. So this is something very noble what WACO and Peace and Sport do for the kids and do for societies who have limited opportunities. So this is what we were discussing about. So giving back is very important. So I wouldn't be the person who I am today without the sport, and the sport can build bridges between societies to promote peace or just regardless religions, regardless social classes, regardless genders. So sport is a unique tool which sometimes underrated, but at the areas where political or diplomatic actions cannot succeed, then there is the soft diplomacy, sport, what can build these bridges and promote peace no matter what. So this is what we do in Peace and Sport, and this is what we try to promote in WACO as well.
That's excellent. I mean, I think your role with WACO as a great thing for the future of sport karate and allowing the athletes to have more say in the running of the organization and things of that nature. But you've taken that to a whole nother level through WACO's involvement with Peace and Sport and your personal involvement with Peace and Sport, and doing humanitarian efforts that don't just help our sport, but on a much broader scale, use sport to help make the world a better place. And I think that there's nothing more noble and honorable than that, and using the sport that made you who you are to help other people find purpose in life and find hope. And as you mentioned, build these bridges between society, social class, race, gender, and everything in between. between. And so thank you from me and from everybody watching this as well for that work that you've done. And thank you for your time. I mean, this has been an excellent show. I'm so appreciative for you taking the time to come on the podcast. Any final thoughts or comments before we wrap up?
Of course, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a pleasure, and it was nice to see you. So it's been a while, and I'm very optimistic, as I told you. So I would like to encourage everyone to stay positive in every aspect. Stay safe and be a little bit more patient and try to be active, which is very important. And just a final comment is that if you have something you can give to your friends, to your community through sport, then do not consider that it's a privilege, but it's a duty. Okay, so what I would like to tell the people is that if you have the reputation, if you have the opportunities, if you have the resources to help, then help the others, especially during these challenging times. I think this is what can help, because I believe that if you help the others, then the others will help you. So everyone stay safe, and it's almost over, so be patient a little bit and be active.
A brilliant message. Thank you so much, Zsolt. If anybody has any questions or any reactions to the show, feel free, go ahead and drop those in the comments down below. If you like the messages that we're sharing today, or you learned something new about sport karate or about Zsolt's career, or maybe even inspired to help change the world through sport, make sure that you go ahead and give this episode a share. You can find us at the Jax Rudolph podcast on YouTube, or every Wednesday here on the Black Belt Magazine Facebook channel. Thank you to everybody so much for tuning in today. This podcast wouldn't be possible without you guys. It also would be possible without Black Belt Magazine, so a big shout out to them. And then one more time, thank you so much, Zsolt, for your time. That's it for us today. Can't wait to see you guys next week. This has been episode 52 of the Jax Rudolph podcast, and I'll see you next time.